What's one of the funniest things that you ever heard your dad say or do? Your Grandpa Jerry, right? What
Yeah.
was? Can you remember a time when he said something that just was so outrageous, or he did something that made you giggle really hard?
Yeah. So one time my dad was in leadership in our church and there was a meeting.
He was so I know this story, and I just want he wasn't just in leadership. He was like, for lack of a better term, the pastor of this region, right?
Right.
He was
Right.
the head guy, the bishop.
He was the head guy over of a group of maybe 300 to 500 members
Okay.
in this church. And they have this an in-service meeting basically where they're all sitting around and you got all these people that are really kind of stoic and it's
they're talking about the welfare of the people.
they're talking about church stuff and they start with a prayer and it's all this and so it's a situation where it's pretty serious stuff, and you're talking about individuals in the group that are having problems and how we can help them and all these things.
People who might be like on hard times and need.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So somebody in there, and remember, we're talking about probably half of them were women.
Okay.
And so there's probably 3 or 4 women in there and 3 or 4 men and a couple of us youth. I was a youth at the time.
How old do you think that you were?
I was maybe 12,
Okay.
pretty young.
Okay.
I was really young. So I was probably 12. And one of the ladies shared a story and one of the other ladies said, "Well, that story just makes my skin crawl." And my dad says, "How does it smell when your butt crawls by your nose?" And he threw his head back in laughter.
He started laughing.
He laughed at his own joke. And initially, the ladies were shocked. And the men knew him. A lot of
Yeah.
the men knew him real well, and I did too. And we just started belly laughing.
Mm-hmm.
And we couldn't stop laughing. And, a couple of ladies weren't real happy
Sure.
about it, but he was the leader, right?
Uh-huh.
And we ended up bringing it all back. But for the rest of that meeting, it was probably a 30-minute meeting. For the rest of that meeting, there was just snickering going on the rest of the meeting the whole time. So that was one of the funniest things my dad ever did.
Do you remember? What are some of the other Grandpa Jerry like one-liners? Do you remember?
Yeah.
'Cause- so a little bit of context, right? You guys are from Dallas, Texas, right? That's where the family's from. What's
Right.
the name of the town that Grandpa grew up in?
My dad grew up in Beaumont, Texas.
Beaumont,
which is
Texas.
along the Gulf Coast down in Texas.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So he was, he was character. He was full of energy and full of life and really buoyant. Let's see, what are
And just
some
so
of the other things?
I'm picturing Grandpa Jerry, and I mean, I saw him when I was little, right? I don't ever saw him as like a 20-year-old or even as an adult, right?
Right.
So like, he had working man's body,
Yeah, he
right?
was,
If you picture Southern working man's body, right? And which I don't know, was he I mean, he obviously worked, but he wasn't like a laborer or anything.
well, that's kind of what he did.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, for years he had a big dump truck.
Okay.
And he would go to construction sites all over Dallas, and after each of the construction phases, the brick and the framing, they would just kind of throw all their extra pieces and parts that they didn't need just around the job site, and he would go up and clean up job sites, and he would throw it in his big dump truck, drive it to the dump, and they would pay him.
Okay.
So he'd go to the same job site 6 or 7 times, and it was always residential homes. So he'd go
Okay.
there after the framing, after the sheetrock, after the brick.
Yeah.
And I remember one time, during the summers I would help him,
Okay.
and it was kind of embarrassing to me, because he called himself a trash man. He used to say, I remember we were driving his big dump truck one time, and he said, I said, how can you be a trash man? And he said, well, when you're rolling in trash, you're rolling in cash, is what he would say. But it didn't really make me feel much better.
That's so dumb.
Especially when we'd go to the dump, and the Dallas dump stunk.
Yeah.
It was like the worst.
So I don't think I've ever been to a dump. What are we talking? Do you drive like 45 minutes outside of Dallas and it's just a big landfill? Is it what it looks like when you
Yeah.
see like in the movie or
Yeah,
whatever?
it's what it looks like. Back then, it was kind of south of Dallas in the South Dallas area, and it was just kind of an isolated, far enough out of Dallas where it didn't bother Dallas, but close enough
Okay.
to be the dump.
So if a big gust of wind came in,
well, you never really smelled it. I mean, I did. I was far enough away growing
Yeah.
up, but when you started,
because I think
getting
about
close,
out in Cuna, I don't know if you in high school I played a couple years of tennis, and one time we played Cuna High. And the moment you got out there, they're right next to a cow pasture.
Yep.
And so the moment you got out on your first forehand, you were just like, and then you would build up a tolerance to it, and then a little breeze would come through, and you'd be backhanded, and you would send it all over the place because it would hit you hard.
That was kind of the way the dump is. When you kind of pulled into the dump, you had to drive back into it, and it was kind of a dirt road kind of a thing. But as you drove, the smell would get more and more intense, where you thought you were going to throw up. And then you were like, I can't take it. My dad would say, just hang on, it'll settle. And then after a while, you smelled it, but it wasn't overwhelming.
Yeah.
But it was initially, and it was the dump where they took everything, like people's junk from their homes and like the trash from that you throw
side
out.
of the road. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So people threw out their, vegetable trash, any kind of trash. So it stunk. And I remember one time, so the dump truck had this big dump on the back of it, and it would lean back like this, and then he would gun it, and the trash would slide. You just pictured it.
Do you know what I pictured was? I pictured this. This is where my mind goes, right? Let's let it rain on top of it for a second, so it becomes like a truck diarrhea, right? Where if you gun it, it'll just soup out. You know what I mean?
Well,
if you can get it nice and soupy in there, it's easier to unload.
Well, and my dad realized
vehicular diarrhea.
it cost money to dump it.
Yeah. Okay.
So
you had to pay when you like a toll booth. You had to be like, hey, I'm here to dump,
and you had to pay a certain amount of money. So my dad would try to get as much trash as he could in it. He would take wood and build up the sides, and he would cover it with a net. I mean, the sides of the truck were only like 6 feet high, but then he would take once you got the trash up to the top, he would stick plywood. And
so did he have like a legit dump truck? Are we talking
it was a legit dump truck.
Okay.
It was legit.
Like big, a garbage truck. Maybe not as big as what the city uses.
Yeah, but it was certainly a hydraulic lift dump truck.
He wasn't okay.
He was serious.
Okay.
And so we would get it full.
Because when you say he built it up, I think Grandpa Jerry having an F-150. He's pack ratting it on there.
Yeah. Which
he would have done if he needed to. He would have done
it, yeah. And I think he probably started with that.
Yeah.
But I think at one point,
big mail bags of trash hanging out the side like a mule.
Yeah. Guys laying on top so it doesn't blow off down the freeway.
Yeah, Kyle, I need you to hold the trash on the way down, and you're just.
That was another one of his jokes.
Yeah.
That was another one of his jokes because at one point, so we would build and since he had to pay to dump it, and he couldn't be loading the truck while he was driving. I always looked forward to going to the dump because it meant I didn't have to work. I just got to sit there.
Sure.
And occasionally if we were close enough to the dump, he would leave me on the job site and just have me stacking stuff. And so I always wanted to go to the dump, even though it stunk and it was no good.
Would he kick you a couple quarters for going with him or something?
No, it was part of it. He would just pay you.
Okay.
I
didn't mean quarters like he was shafting you.
No,
you need to
were
unionize for your dad or anything like that.
You didn't unionize for Dad. He wouldn't have had that.
Yeah. If I even get a whiff of a strike in this household,
if all my sons strike on me, you're
he's
fired.
He's
I'll get some more sons.
I'll just make some more sons.
Because it was usually us. It was usually us sons and a couple of illegal aliens.
Okay.
Yeah.
That
had come in,
picking them up from Home Depot or something like that.
I don't think he ever did that because there was always he always had a crew that he could pick up at any time.
Okay.
Guys he knew that would just need work.
Okay.
But we go to the dump one time and so he didn't want to go. He wanted to fill his truck as full as possible.
Yeah.
So he could get value for it.
So he could get his $25.
So he would get the trash to the side, to the top, and then we would take 2x4, not 2x4s, but like 4x8 sheets of plywood, and slide them down into the trash so they would extend the top. Another 4 or 5 feet.
Okay.
And so one time we got there and we had it packed so tight that it wouldn't dump, and he was doing it, and it was so heavy that the front end of the truck started coming up.
Okay, so the press wasn't the hydraulics wasn't strong enough to push it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so he's trying to bump the truck and get it to slide out. But then
is he rocking in the cab?
He really is. Yeah. He's leaning forward. Yeah. All this stuff.
And I want to describe Grandpa Jerry a little bit. When I said working man's body, it's the classic a plaid button-up shirt with blue jeans, some kind of boot, and then a big old belt buckle which you can't see because his belly's hanging over the top of
exactly
it, right?
who he was.
Which he may not have been that way when you were younger,
Yeah.
but that's how he was as a grandpa.
He was that way. Yeah,
okay,
for
okay,
sure.
okay.
Big dude, jolly.
Yeah.
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 Hardworking.
However you picture Superman's dad, earthly dad looking, that's
yeah,
probably what he
that's
looked
him.
like.
Yeah, yeah. That's him. Yeah. Yeah, but one time it was so heavy, we filled it so full, and it was so heavy that as this truck went up, the front of the truck started lifting.
Uh-oh.
And he's like, "Hey, go hop on the hood." I'm like, "What the crap are you talking about?" He's like, "No, just a little bit of weight will balance us out." And so I climb out on the hood of the truck, and it's starting to lift, and he's bumping it, and I'm like, riding a bull or something. I thought I was
goodness.
going to die. But anyway, he ended up getting it.
Like in the movie RV when Robin Williams gets his RV stuck up on that cliff and he's having a
That's
rock.
exactly kind of what it was. Yeah. And this is real stuff.
Yeah.
It real happens, right? But yeah, I remember one time we were
Do you
working.
imagine that the dump workers were over at their like little kiosk, just like looking out at you guys, like what in the world is going on?
I think they probably had seen it a million times.
They probably seen way
the
wilder.
guys who go to the dump regularly are all pretty much like my dad.
Sure. Yeah.
to
Just
make a
honest dudes. Yeah, trying to make it, trying to make it a living.
Yeah, and I'm sure he was upper crust because he had an actual hydraulic dump
Yeah.
truck.
There probably were dudes out there with their F-150 building.
There were plenty of dudes out there. Not
Yeah.
only were they out there dumping, they were out there picking too. Like they would go out there and dump, and you'd see guys leaving with stuff, which they didn't care.
Yikes.
Back then, they didn't even care. You take something with you, they're like, fine.
Yeah.
We don't even care. But one time he left me on a job, and I was like, he wanted me to stack the bricks in one spot and all this stuff so that when we got back, because normally it would be everywhere, and we'd have to gather it up. And I said, how am I going to tell my friends I'm a trash man?
Yeah.
And he said, you've heard this
I'm
story.
a trash teen. I'm not even I'm not even old enough to be a trash man. Yeah.
And he said, well, just tell them you're a pilot. And I said, how am I going to tell them I'm a pilot? He said, well, you pilot there, and you pilot there, and you pilot there, and then we throw it in the truck. So my dad was always
and he had a big grin on his face too, because he knew. Yeah, and he knew it kind of ticked you off a little bit.
Yeah,
didn't it?
but the funniest
which
thing,
made it funnier for him too.
He enjoyed picking at me and my brothers.
Yeah.
Out there.
Well, it's funny too, because when you are a 12-year-old or a 13, even up to like 16, 17, 18, people picking at you really degrades your ego, and it feels like the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
But when you get to be a little bit older, you're like, nothing's funnier than a PO teenager, because they're just fuming, and they don't realize that like this is but a moment in the grand scheme. You know what I mean? When someone's stepping to you as a teenager, you think that the entire world is attacking you, right?
Because your ego's just growing in those
yeah.
areas.
Mm-hmm.
But I think my dad was,
but being older, you're like, nothing's better than seeing
fun.
a teenager squirm, man.
Yeah, stirring them up.
Yeah, stir
them up. And I've done it to you guys over the years.
Sure,
too.
sure.
But because it's fun. But he also had a like a sponge brick. It would look just like a red brick, but it was made of sponge.
Okay.
And so you'd be throwing bricks from the ground up there, and sometimes they would hit the side of the truck and come back, and you'd have to run under there, and you're watching, right?
Yeah.
Because bricks are flying, and my dad would inevitably, wait until some guy wasn't looking and nearby, and he would take that sponge brick and he would throw it, and he would say, "Watch out!" And the guy would turn, and there's a brick heading for him. And he would think he's going to die, and it would go boing off the guy's head. And we would
it had the
fall.
Adobe grooves in it and everything
It
to
was
make
a
it look
perfectly red brick.
Yeah.
It was the Acme red brick.
Which it's in Texas, that's the only thing they build houses out of is that red brick.
Yeah. Well, there's different colors, but mostly
Sure.
it's red brick.
Oh, I remember being was the Cedar Hill house a red brick house?
It was a red brick house.
Okay, I remember that, right?
Yeah.
Even Red Oak had some red brick in it. Maybe more brown, huh?
Yeah, it did have some brown.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You're going to giggle at this. Speaking of red brick, right? My buddy Justin, he texted me the other day, and he's like, man, I've been on Zillow looking at houses in Texas. And I'm like, what kind of housewife are you, my boy? Like, you're looking at houses in Texas? Like, why are you doing that? He's like, because you can get a mansion out there for half the price it costs around here. You know what I mean? And I'm like, yeah, but you got to live in Texas. You know what I mean?
Right.
But that was one thing he pointed out. He's like, this is made of brick. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah,
Unlike the crap that they were building around here. But he was
Right.
texting me this. It was making me giggle, man. Because when he showed me the picture, he's like, look at this house. Look at this house. And it was red brick, sure enough. And I was like, yeah, they're all built out of that red brick down there.
Yeah. And I think my dad knew that if he picked at us, that we could learn how to be picked at without falling apart.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that was part of what he did, and I've done it with you guys. But the backside of that is that
do you think he knew that, and that's what he was
I don't
doing
know
on
if he
purpose?
knew it or not. But
Because I think whether I think there are some parents, and maybe not parents, but people in general pick at other people for their own amusement.
Yeah.
Right. It does teach them how to not like get picked
apart.
at without falling apart, but it's not as generous. It's more malicious.
Well,
know what I mean?
obviously my dad wasn't afraid to pick at anybody. If he's saying, how does it smell?
Yeah. He was making butt crack jokes in church. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's funny how it's funny how, because I do it to you guys, and I've always done it to you guys, and I think I purposely decided that if I mess with you and call you guys knuckleheads and goofballs, then you can't really be hurt by people out in the public.
Yeah.
They'll call you a bad word, and you'll just say your mama, whatever you say, right? Because you don't even care. But the thing is eventually as a parent,
do you remember the most jacked up thing you used to say to us as kids? This is.
I don't know if I said it or. Sometimes as a parent, you wipe things from your memory because you're not real proud of it.
Sure.
So tell me.
And you change, obviously. The parent that you were to me when I was 11 is not the same,
right.
19 years later, right?
Right.
You used to ask us, you guys got brain damage or something?
I remember saying that.
Yeah. And that was when you had a little bit more fury in you, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I had more fury.
But I remember as a 9-year-old, 10, 11, I remember saying that and going, I don't know if you should be saying that. That was the first glimpse of woke behavior within me. I was I don't know if he should be saying that.
I think
it seems a little politically incorrect.
It probably was. The thing is, I think is no parent is perfect, right?
Sure.
We're all going to make mistakes, but we're just doing the best we can. And to know your dad, obviously I knew my dad loved me, even though he would pick at us and have fun with us and all that kind of stuff. But
yeah.
But the funny thing is you guys have started doing it back to me now, which is the funniest. One of my favorite things to do is if I'm driving and I see a sprinkler shooting into the street, you know this, I'll swerve and hose you down. I'll roll your window down and lock it, and swerve and hose you down. And not long ago, I was riding with Ricky, and I'm just driving along. I mean, he's driving along, and I'm just relaxing, taking it easy. And all of a sudden, he swerves, and I'm like, "What's going on?" And I get water sprayed in my face, and he just starts dying.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm thinking, they're getting me back, Today at church, you're gonna laugh at this. This happened today. So I got a calling in church today, and in our church, they'll say we have a new calling for Brother Jetzel, and they'll
kind of volunteer type stuff.
Volunteer stuff.
Can you work with the youth? Can you work with the? Can you? Yeah.
Right. And they announce that at the beginning of church so that everybody can see who's going to be the new, youth guy or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So
to give you kind of like a vote of trust, just it's like introduce to anybody who may not know Kyle, and also we got your back if you need our help in this volunteer work that you're doing.
Yeah. And so we always sit in the way back corner.
Yeah.
For years because of Eric, because he would get loud.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to bother anybody. So it's
yeah.
become a habit. So me and Jack and Chloe, your brother and sister, they're 16-year-old twins. You know this, but we're sitting there and they say, and if we call your name, please stand up so people can see who you are. And so they call my name and I stand up. And right as I stand up, everybody turns to look because everybody knows we're sitting in the back corner.
Yeah.
And Jack reaches up and pinches my rear end and I jump. And you can hear the congregation gasp and start giggling.
Because you went like that. You threw both your hands.
I went like, I stand up, I'm trying to be somber and stoic.
Yeah.
I stand up and and I'm sure he grinned from ear to ear because he's sitting and he's just
Yeah.
And I can hear everybody
in your moment of spotlight. He gave you a little booty pinch.
I hear everybody. You could just hear people giggle because so many people know who we are.
Yeah.
That it's kind of expected, But the idea that you're and you do it too. We can have fun with each other. We can poke fun at each other, and there's offense isn't taken. And even earlier today, you called me out for something, and you say, "I'm not doing that." I said, "Don't worry about it." We all need to be called out periodically.
Yeah.
But the point is, those having fun with it, goofing around with it, doing those kind of things is always more fun, right?
Yeah.
And to know you can share your, my dad he was such a buoyant guy. He just left a wake of happiness
Yeah.
everywhere he went.
Yeah.
And if you have that personality, why not?
Yeah.
I mean, he used to say what Charles Barkley said, right? Half the world's going to love you, half the world's going to hate you. Let the lovers love, let the haters hate, and be yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I think that's who he was, and that's who I've tried to be, and I know that's who you're being too.
Yeah, as much
fun.
as it's much more fun. Yeah. Yeah.
So
I like that quote by Barkley. I always worry too, it's like, because there's a lot of like be yourself going around.
oh yeah.
Right? And I'm like, yeah, unless yourself is an a-hole, then you should be everything
what?
but yourself. You know what I mean?
Well, that's
So like so I always wonder sometimes, it's like, obviously you don't want to change who you are. You don't want to change, like, you don't want to like alter your personality to like fit a mold.
right.
But if you've got some issues in your personality, I sometimes I wonder, how do you distinguish the two, right? How do you distinguish between like, no, this is who I am, and this is what makes me unique, and this is what makes me, just like a different flavor in society, and that flavor is good.
Yeah.
Or what are the parts of me that I should be changing, right? Because it's ignorant to think that you shouldn't change any part of yourself.
Right. And I think that's a great point. I think that the answer to that question for me has always been, I pay attention to outcomes. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
I mean, and if half's going to love you and half's going to hate you, it's probably not half and half, right?
Sure.
You want to be kind and you want to be liked and you want to be friendly.
Yeah.
But if you're walking around, and here's one thing that I've learned is, if somebody says, if somebody tells you, I like you, you tell it the way it is, that should be a red flag for you, because it means you're an a-hole. And nobody else likes you but just your friends who like you.
Yeah.
And they're just your friends because
Yeah.
they're being patient with you being an a-hole.
Or you haven't picked at them hard enough yet.
Right.
You haven't said the thing that makes them run
They
away.
haven't become a target for you yet.
Yeah.
So pay attention to that.
There's another, it's like in iRobot, I don't know if you remember, he says, does being the last sane man on the planet make you crazy? Right?
Yeah, that's a good line.
Right? Which is like, and the answer ultimately is, I mean, unless you're in the movie iRobot where he was right the whole time.
Right.
But the answer is yes. If you think you're the last sane person, you're crazy, right?
Right.
And another version of that is like, if you run into an idiot at the beginning of the day, that was an idiot and you can move on.
Right.
If you run into another idiot, dang, two for two, that's
a lot of
crazy.
idiots.
If you run into any more idiots during the day,
Yeah, maybe you're the idiot.
You're the idiot, right? Yeah.
And I think that's a great point, and that's why you got to pay attention to your outcomes, right?
Sure.
If you don't have a lot of friends, chances are you're just not generally very friendly, and you need to make some. It's easy to be kind.
Yeah.
You and I
Yeah.
have talked about this, and maybe it's the best place to say it. But if your best friend's an animal, you might have some issues you might need to look at. Because and I've heard people say, "Well, I wish dogs could talk." Maybe you don't. Your dog would say, "You suck.
Yeah.
You feed me, so I stay around. But don't you stop feeding me? I'll eat you."
Sure.
I'm not saying
Sure.
that's everybody. I'm just saying pay
Yeah.
attention to outcomes.
Yeah.
If your outcomes are generally bad, it might be in time to change the way
Yeah.
you look at things or do things, and have. I'm living in a pretty happy world.
Yeah.
So I think I've got a reasonably good
And
balance.
Grandpa Jerry especially, right? Like
Yeah.
that dude had an abundance of friends,
Yeah.
Like you tell me about at his funeral how many people came home, they're
Oh
like,
my
"Hey,
gosh.
I needed that guy." Even if it was just for the 15 minutes. So, he obviously had found the right level of like, how much, potty humor can I get away with, or metaphorical potty humor, just
Right.
how much inappropriateness can I get away with before I really am driving people away in a bad way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or how much irreverence or how much crudeness, right? And and he found the right balance where he kept as many friends as he could, right? No, he was never driving people away.
Well, he did drive some people away.
Sure.
'Cause I
Okay,
remember-
that's a good.
I
That's good to
remember
point
when
out.
they released him from his assignment in
Yeah.
church, where he was the leader.
like 20 people came back to church.
Yeah, like 2 full families came back to church that hadn't been there in like 8 or 10 years.
Oh,
And I asked him
wow.
about that.
Yeah.
And I said, "Dad, how do you come to grips with, these 2 families that just wouldn't come to church because they didn't like you?"
Yeah.
And he said, "You know what? I did the best I could.
Yeah.
I tried to be happy. I tried to be friendly. I tried to set the right mood." And he said, "You just kind of have to let the chips. Not everybody's going to love you.
Sure.
And sometimes all it takes is one little potty humor joke to just turn some people completely off.
Yeah.
And maybe that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't want to necessarily be around them all the time anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, my dad had
And it's kind of like God's going to have to forgive both of us for different things anyway.
That's right.
Right? So God's going to have to forgive me for that toilet humor, and he's going to have to forgive them for not coming for 8
There's
years. You know what I mean?
probably
Like,
something to be said for that. Yeah.
God's going to have to forgive both of us. So
Well, the thing is-
neither of us are exempt from blame here.
Yeah,
You know
and
what
the
I
next
mean?
guy that came along that was a leader was so stoic. It's almost like he didn't have much of a personality. And there were people that didn't want to come to church because of his
So
personality.
the people that thrived off of Grandpa Jerry's buoyancy, right?
Were-
Maybe they didn't stop coming, but they didn't feel quite as like stoked to come to church
Exactly.
every Sunday.
And I think that's okay, right?
Yeah.
I think that's part of the deal.
Yeah.
The key is for us to just try to be
Well, we're not
kind.
meant to have a million friends either.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Right. Yeah.
number one, you can't even know that. Number two, like that sounds exhausting. You know,
It does.
But
Well, and the thing too is there's a cost for behaviors. You know, I mean, and people don't like. I think that's really where you're going with this idea of be who you are and don't worry about like everything's okay.
yeah,
As long as you realize there's a cost for having a pierced lip, right? Now you might say there shouldn't be, but there's going to be some people like myself. If I see you have a pierced lip, you're going to have to do some work to overcome that pierced lip. For me, as a conservative,
yeah,
you know, just
yeah,
I mean, older guy.
yeah, or even more like broad is like your behaviors on social media or whatever it may be.
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
it's like right or wrong, the ability for you to spout off every opinion that you have is not. I mean, it's not going to work out in some cases, right?
Right.
Yeah, because I think of the people that I have in my circle, and sometimes it is only through social media. It is like, man, I've changed myself a lot for certain people, and I decided I never would do that again, right?
Yeah.
But those are the people that I would least like to hang out with because of the way that they are. You know what I mean?
Right.
And this is definitely not like me from an ivory tower saying you need to change everything and I need to change nothing. You
Right,
know,
right.
it seems a little willfully ignorant to think that you don't need to ever change anything about your personality.
Right.
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 Even though your personality is attached to you and you don't want to give it up, there are aspects of it, whether it be your sarcasm, your irritability, you know, all those things do make you you, but those things can be, you know, it sure seems like they can be kind of pruned off to find the better portion that's underneath all of it, right?
Well, there's some wisdom in realizing you don't have to say everything you think either.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you can
Or
be in a-
type everything you
or
think.
type everything you think. You know, that was one of the things I learned about myself when Facebook first came out and I first got on it.
Yeah.
Is I realized how mean I was. My first initial thought was just people would say stuff and I would just start typing some crazy
Yo,
mean stuff and then I would just delete.
I'm in that era right now where Facebook is reminding me of statuses that I posted when I was 16,
Oh,
17,
yeah,
18,
yeah.
and they are horrendously embarrassing to read.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, "Hey, 11 years ago you said this," and it's just me being, you know, angsty and loud with loneliness and, you know, like, "Hey everybody, it would be nice to have a friend right now." You know, like that. I don't know if that not word for word, but that kind of
I
stuff. And I'm
understand.
like, "Dadgum."
Yeah.
Right? Like it's obviously loneliness is hard to deal with, you know, and,
Right.
and maybe I was, you know, experiencing that, but also like keep it to yourself, little boy, you know, like it makes you seem
Well-
desperate and thirsty and weird, you know?
Yeah, that's the other thing I learned about Facebook too is because when I was growing up, I went to high school with this girl that was she was a strawberry shortcake, and I don't know. For those that don't know what a strawberry shortcake is in high school, so where I grew up in inner city Dallas, a strawberry shortcake means everybody gets a piece. Okay, so this girl was a little.
Bless her heart.
Yes, bless her heart.
Bless her heart.
Sugar. But I hop on Facebook and it's been 25 years since I went to high school. And this girl comes up and she's just like over the top religious. Everything is a scripture or a shout out to God about everything. And you know, the first thing that crossed my mind was, boy, this is the fakest piece of crap I've ever. And it took me a while to realize
Yeah.
she'd been through some stuff. She changed. And I had to think, well, I've changed. Why
Yeah.
can't she change? Right.
Yeah.
And so I hope, And I think we're all going to have to do this, or we're all going to be stuck in our. Is we got to realize that some of the stuff we did we're going through different phases, and it's who we are at that moment, and we're going to grow out of it and do different things, or maybe it stays, maybe it doesn't, But yeah, I mean, there are pictures and things that I recall doing as a kid that I'm like, I can't believe I did that.
Yeah.
But it also allows us to realize, our kids are going to do it too,
Sure.
and to be patient with them, right?
Yeah.
Because there's going to be some things that your kids do, and I know my kids have done, that I'm like, why the crap? What do they have, brain damage? But
Yeah, what, you got brain damage or something? Yeah.
Now, I'd never say that now, and
yeah,
I know
yeah.
you'll never say it
Yeah.
because you realize the impact it had.
Sure. Yeah.
And there's things that my dad did that
Well,
I'll never do.
let me put an asterisk on that. I only remember it because it was so outrageous. It never hurt me because I was like, this is over the line, man. Even as a kid, I was like, this is such an outrageous thing to say to a child that it didn't even hurt my feelings. You know what I mean? I was just like,
you were probably ready to fight over it by the time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because that's your personality is that way. It's type A.
Sure.
So you were like, oh, God, knock this sucker out.
No, there was other things that you probably said that did get that fire in my belly.
Yeah.
But the brain damage thing, like I said,
weird.
it was. I was like,
Yeah.
this is weird. It's a weird thing to say.
There's something to be said for, and I'm not saying it was right because it wasn't. I shouldn't have said that. But there are some moments today where I'll be in a group of people and I will say something that's a bit shocking. Because I want to filter.
Yeah, yeah.
Like there's certain people that I know that if they're highly offended by something, that they're probably not going to be my people, And so I'll say some things that just kind of, borderline on that edge.
Yeah.
To see their reaction, if they smile and they realize, oh, Kyle's a fool and he's having fun.
Yeah. I don't know if I do something similar. I don't purposely try to shock anybody.
Yeah.
But I'll drop a SpongeBob quote in the middle of a group.
Oh, that's probably a better way to do it.
Right?
Yeah.
And because whoever giggled, like it was just last night we were hanging out with some friends and I can't remember. Oh yeah. We were talking about rich people. And I said, that guy has a swimming pool in his swimming pool, right? When they're going to go sell chocolate.
Yeah.
And a dude on the other side of the circle went, and I was like, there he is. There's my boy right there, right?
Right.
Right.
Well, I was an example for me, which is probably not the greatest, was I went to this dinner with a bunch of couples, and we got seated at a table with a guy named Friedenberger.
I know Friedenberger. He's a good guy.
You know Friedenberger.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Good guy.
Yeah.
And I started teasing him about, where's Friedenberger come from? And he says, well, it's German, And, the name, the Berger or the Stein at the end of names can usually lead to like Jew, Jewish, or Jewish names in a lot of cases. So I started teasing him. I said, so a German Jew. He said, what? I said, Friedenberger? Right? And you could see the wheels spinning.
Yeah.
And then he looked at me and I grinned and he grinned. And I knew, I'm going to like this guy.
Yeah.
Because he knows I'm goofing with him,
Yeah.
And it doesn't even matter what the name means.
Sure.
But then it just became the silliness that went along with it. Now, his wife wasn't so crazy about me teasing him. And so after a few minutes, Shelly reached over and just kind of gave me a tap like my wife,
Yeah.
And Shelly would do this for me sometimes. And she would say, hey, the wife ain't digging it.
Yeah.
You don't want the guy to go home and have to deal with his wife hassling him about it.
Yeah.
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 And I backed off a little bit. But the whole thing was that now I know I've got an ally out there, Friedenberger.
Yeah.
Every time I see him now, I'm going to be,
Yeah.
hey.
A little bit more excited to see him.
A little bit more
Yeah.
excited because I know he's got that type of personality, right?
Sure.
Now, if I would have pressed at it, and he would have gotten a little defensive, I would have backed off quick and apologized and ran away.
Yeah.
But there's things you do just to kind of drop these little bombs here and there to see
Sure.
what kind of reaction you get with people,
That's funny.
But
okay, I want to tell. I asked you at the very beginning the funniest thing your dad said, so I'm gonna tell my story and then we'll wrap up this episode.
Sounds good.
Same thing at church, right? This is the goofiest thing I heard you say that made me giggle real hard.
All right.
Right. We were at church. Same thing. It was like Wednesday night activities. And they'll have like the young men that go up there and the young women, and sometimes they'll do their own thing. Sometimes they'll hang out and do something together. So we were doing something scouting related, and the young women at the same time were having a talent show. They were having a talent show in kind of the like gym area, right?
Yeah.
So the young men finish up, we're leaving. You pick up me and you pick up Zach, my younger brother.
Right.
And as we're leaving, there's this, one of the young women's leaders, right, at the door, kind of ushering any people in that still want to catch the end of the,
The
talent show.
Okay.
And
So it's still going on. The talent show's still going on.
it's finishing up,
Okay,
right?
okay.
It's finishing up. She's like, hey, come on in, like you support these young women and their talents, know? And from where we were at, we could hear, clarinets being played and
like
and
Squidward.
And I'm sure one gal got out her streamer and did an interpretive dance, One girl was doing sign language to a country song, which power, yeah. In my I don't know, I don't know nothing about sign language.
Right.
So we could hear all that coming, right? And this lady, bless her heart, right? She wanted people to come in. She's like, hey, come in, And I think we peeked in, and when we peeked in, there was a chubby girl doing slam poetry when we peeked our head in there, right? Right? This is my experience,
Sure.
Right? So we leaned our heads in. You looked at us, you looked at the lady, and you went, God, we'd love to. And my head sank. And then you went, but not really. And we left. We just took off right outside the door. And we left
I told her, but not really.
Yeah.
I came clean.
Yeah, you went, we'd love to, but not really. Like that. And you left, and we followed right behind. And the lady's mouth was just like, oh, okay, like.
She didn't even get it.
She didn't know. Yeah. We'd love to, but not really. And I've used that that phrase had me giggling, man. I'd never heard just in quick succession. I'd love to, but not really. So funny, man.
Thank goodness we didn't do that.
Yeah. Because we had already finished our activity, and it was like, it's time to go home, man. I'm not trying to be here any longer for that.
That's I'm fond of saying, if I really don't want to do something, I'll say, it was so bad that I'd rather my mama switch me 15 times than do that.
Yeah.
And people understand inherently.
Yeah.
You get switched 15 times, there's whelps and there's pain and there's a lot of and it's just scary stuff.
Yeah.
So,
And I want to clarify, right? Obviously, there were some girls that had talent.
of course.
But when you do an open talent show, right? Open enrollment talent show. It's like 1 out of 10 that's got to be
1
real.
out of 10, yeah. There's a lot of just trying to
if you're going to
get
put
through
on
it.
a talent show, hold auditions.
There you go.
There you go.
All right,
Cool.
man.
Cool. Thanks for chatting with me. We'll see everybody next time.
Sounds good.